Hey, timekeepers. Welcome back to the We Got Time Today podcast. I'm your host, Will on the mic. And what do we have time for today? Well, let me set the stage for you. In 1875, just 10 years after slavery ended, a black man from Mississippi walked into the United States Senate. His name was Blanche Kelso Bruce. Born enslaved, freed himself, educated himself, brought land, built wealth. And somehow, in a nation still healing from war and drowning in white supremacy, he made it to Washington, D.C. Now, that's a flex, don't you think? But I have a question. If America was so terrified of black power, why didn't they fear Blanche Bruce? Why was he the only one they let through the door? And more importantly, why do today's black Republicans keep bringing him up while leaving out the part where the Republican Party did a complete 180? Today, we're going to talk about the power, the polish, and the politics of being the safe Negro. We're diving into Blanche Bruce's legacy, what he represents, and why respectability politics may be one of the biggest scams ever sold to Black America. So, before we get into all of that, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single episode of We Got Time Today. So, let me set the stage for us. Again, it's 1875. Construction is still breathing, barely. The South is burning with resentment, and Blanche Bruce, he's about to make history. Born in 1841 in Virginia, his mother was enslaved and his father was her owner. I know, crazy. Let that sink in. The system was that twisted. But Blanche learned to read and write. He escaped slavery, and after the Civil War, he moved to Mississippi. He became a landowner, a sheriff, a tax collector, and eventually a United States Senator, the first black man to serve a full 6-year term in the Senate. Now, don't get it twisted. Bruce wasn't a placeholder. He advocated for black suffrage, for public education, and for Native rights. He even opposed anti-Chinese discrimination when most politicians was pushing for exclusion. He believed that equality wasn't just for us, it was for everybody. He had that Frederick Douglass kind of energy, visionary, articulate, diplomatic. But here's the catch. Blanche Bruce played the game the way white America wanted it to be played. Let's be real. White folks didn't see Blanche Bruce as a threat because he was polished, calm, and non-confrontational. He was wealthy, light-skinned, he was educated, he married into an elite northern black family, he dressed like money, and spoke like Harvard. He was the blueprint for one of the good ones. He didn't shout about revolution or reparations. He talked about fairness, unity, and progress. And that made him palatable to a room full of white men who couldn't even look at freedom without clutching their pearls. They liked him because he wasn't there to flip the table, just to ask politely for a seat. Now I want to read you something Blanche Bruce said on the Senate floor in 1876. During a debate about voter intimidation in Mississippi, he said, and I quote, "We simply demand the practical recognition of the rights given to us in the Constitution and laws and acts from our white fellow citizens, only the consideration and fairness that we so willfully extend to them." Now let's unpack that. We simply demand. You hear that? That's not anger, that's restraint. He's softening the blow before he even makes it. The practical recognition of rights, meaning we already have these rights, you just keep refusing to honor them. And then the line, we ask from our white fellow citizens only the consideration and fairness that we willingly extend to them. That's not diplomacy, that's more of survival language. Bruce is basically saying, we're not coming for revenge, we just want the law to mean what it says. It's a powerful statement if you ask me, but it's also telling because even in his most righteous moments, he's centering white comfort. He's saying, don't fear us. We're not here to disrupt. We just want a fair shot. And that's why America didn't fear him, because whiteness doesn't fear what doesn't fight back. I'm going to repeat that. Whiteness doesn't fear what doesn't fight back. It fears rebellion, not reason. It fears confrontation, not courtesy. But here's the gag. All that class, all that polish, and all that diplomacy couldn't save him. Because when Reconstruction collapsed in 1877, white supremacy came roaring back like it never left. The troops were pulled out, Jim Crow came in, and Mississippi, the same state that sent Blanche Bruce to the Senate, rewrote its constitution to make sure no black man ever got that close to power again. They tolerated him until they didn't need him. That's the lesson. Respectability gets you a temporary pass, not protection. Now, we always have time to talk about the past, but I always want to make sure I bring it to why I'm talking about the past and how it resonates to today. So, if we fast forward to today, you see it in folks like Tim Scott, Byron Donalds, Burgess Owens, Candace Owens, the modern black conservatives who are celebrated by white America, not because they challenge it, but because they conform to it. When Tim Scott says, America is not a racist country, white voters exhale. They take a big old breath. When Byron Donalds defends Trump's record with a smile, white donors open their wallets. You see, he's running for the governor of Florida. And when Candace Owens says slavery wasn't about race, well, Fox News gives her airtime. Not so much now because I think, didn't they fire her? But that's something for a different day. That's not a coincidence, that's choreography. Because the same playbook that made Blanche Bruce safe in 1875 is alive and well in 2025. Be articulate, be polished, be grateful, never be confrontational. That's the audition for access. And let's be honest, the audition still happens in politics, in media, in corporate America, in the church, and even in our own communities. Now here's where it gets slick. Every time a modern black Republican gets backed into a corner about race, they pull out the same line. Well, Republicans freed the slaves. And yeah, that was true in 1865. But let's talk about what happened after that. By the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement, the parties flipped. Democrats under Kennedy and Johnson started backing civil rights legislation. Republicans, through the Southern strategy, started appealing to white Southern voters angry about desegregation. That's the switch. Lincoln's Republicans freed us, Nixon's Republicans locked us up, Reagan's Republicans cut the social safety net. Trump's Republicans told white nationalists they were very fine people. So when today's black conservatives brag about being in the party of Lincoln, what they really mean is the party of nostalgia. They cling to the myth because it gives them cover. Because if they admit the switch happened, then they'll have to admit that their party stopped fighting for us a long time ago. Let's really sit with this question though. Does respectability politics actually help black people? Look, being polished, being professional, that's fine. That's survival. But performing politeness to make white people feel comfortable, that's not strategy, that's surrender. Historically, yes, nonviolent protests and moral discipline had power. Think about Dr. Martin Luther King's movement. The world saw black dignity against white brutality, and that contrast shift opinions. But that's not the same as respectability. Respectability politics says if we act right, they'll treat us right. But history keeps proving that that does not happen. We've played by every rule, but the rules keep changing. Respectability might open a door, but it doesn't move the walls. And that's the difference between access and liberation. Access gets you an invitation. Liberation means you own the house. Say it again. Access gets you an invitation. Liberation means you own the house. So what do you want? Do you want access? Or do you want liberation? What do you have time for? So what do we learn from Blanche Bruce? That he was brilliant, strategic, historic, yes, but also a man of his time. He believed in America enough to act it politely to live up to its own laws. And maybe that was the only kind of black power the country was willing to tolerate back then. The kind that didn't raise its voice. But let me tell you something. If America only celebrates us when we're silent, polite, and grateful, then that's not progress, that's performance. Blanche Bruce's story reminds us that power without confrontation isn't power, it's just permission. So, timekeepers, here's what I want you to think about today. When a black politician, or any politician at that, asks for your support, ask them, who are you fighting for? And who are you afraid to offend? I think that ending of the question is where a lot of our politicians suffer, or they struggle to answer that question. Who are they afraid to offend? Are they afraid to offend donors, which means that they go against their constituents? I think we're seeing that now with a lot of the elections that's happening, right? Or people going up for re-elections. They don't want to offend the donors. But at the end of the day, if you don't have constituents, what does the donors really, what does it mean? What does it matter? Who are you fighting for? Are you fighting for your donors? Or are you fighting for your constituents? Are you giving your constituents a voice? Because that's what the people are electing you for. That's who you work for. You don't work for the donors. So Who are you fighting for? And who are you afraid to offend? If you answer that question, sound off in the comments. Who are you fighting for? And who are you afraid to offend? So, as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single episode of We Got Time Today. Until next time, timekeepers. Bye.